Welcome to episode 61 of Rubbish Talk with myself, Alistair Meldrum.
And myself, Jane Bond.
And this week we have Bryce Cunningham. A bit of a departure from our normal because Bryce is a farmer and the founder and managing director of Mossgiel Organic Farm. So more about that later, but there is a waste connection in amongst all this. So as usual, before we start, I'd like to welcome all our new listeners to Rubbish Talk. We've had quite an increase over the last few weeks and months. And just a little reminder, what we try and do on the podcast is we try and share some of the complexity of the waste sector. And we try and do that by trying to interview experts from various areas across the sector. So diverse range of guests and look at their career journey and what they've done in the past. And before we do the interview, we usually, myself and Jane, have a brief recap of any waste management news that has caught our attention. It's not very scientific how we do it. It's just we gather up what we've seen recently and try and do a little bit of an update. But I did get a wee update from a previous guest, and his new boss was not from the waste sector, and he was asked what podcast he would recommend. So he has recommended Rubbish Talk, and this new boss loves the news section, Jane.
Really?
So there we go.
My goodness.
All our time is not wasted. Yeah, what have we got this week then?
Well, I suppose we first starting with the fire, another battery fire again at Kilwinning, which looked pretty awful on the on some of the pictures. Lots of fire and smoke coming out. And that's about almost a year to the day, isn't it, after the previous one. And they had a previous fire there as well. So there was quite a lot of fire engines and firefighters and specialist resources as well employed to put out the fire. But yeah, not a good one.
Yeah, it did not look a good one from the pictures. And talking about fires, my big race last weekend was cancelled because of a major fire in the Galloway's Hills. So there was a massive. Our race was meant to start on back at 3 o'clock on the Saturday, and they cancelled it about 4 o'clock in the morning. We had a major emergency actually, because there were people out wild camping and stuff in the hills, and there were seemingly the mountain rescue report is out of the 3 groups that were rescued, and they were helicoptered out, they weren't exactly walked out, one set of tents was still intact, and the other 2 sets of tents they can't even find. So it's a pretty significant fire. So, but I did have a bit of a lucky escape with that, because my race was meant to start at 3 o'clock, and I somehow managed to contract that vomiting bug, which came on with a vengeance about 5 o'clock that evening. So I would have quite likely been at the top of a mountain, shivering and shaking and chucking up. So the gods were looking out for me that day, I'll tell you. So there you go.
Saved by the fire.
Anyway,
what else have you got?
What else have we got? We've got BBC. BBC have done a big report about the green fuel, the HVO diesel, which is usually made from things like vegetable oil, but there is thought that it's been made from virgin palm oil instead, and it's been fraudulently labelled. So there's been a big BBC report about it. Interestingly enough, Resource Management Association Scotland was doing a visit last week at Highland Fuels up at Montrose. And seemingly, I couldn't make it. I was double booked or triple booked as usual. But seemingly, they're an excellent visit. But I noticed they put out a press release just at the start of the week there about how they try and deal with this, and how they've made sure their HVO supplies are the correct material and not made from virgin palm oil. So I do know in Ayrshire that people are going out stealing vegetable oil that restaurants put out before the main contractor gets round. So there does seem to be a bit of an issue around waste oils. So there you go.
Because it is saying that HVO, which I had to look at, is hydro-treated vegetable oil, has been called something of a wonder fuel in recent years, as it can be used as a 100% substitute for diesel, reducing planet warming emissions. But it also says Europe used more of this waste in HVO and other biofuels in 2023 than it is thought possible for the world to produce. So, there's something not quite right. The stats don't quite add up there. Even me not being the best at numbers. So we're having a birthday this year as well. Not that it was mine last weekend, but this is to do with 50 years since the first Control of Pollution Act 1974. So when I started in waste management, such a long time ago, that was the COPA 74 was the main legislation, and there's an article from the CIWM past president David Wilson talking about it. And talking about he happened to start his first job in the sector at the old Harwell laboratory a week after COPA was enacted. So you're starting from that start of the regulations. I know when I was starting it was COPA, and then I moved to I went and did an MSc, and that was just as the Control of Pollution Act 1990, mother of all legislation, came out. And now everything's changing.
The Environment Protection Act, you meant?
Yeah, what did I
Control
say?
of Pollution Act.
Oh, for goodness sake.
The Control of Pollution Act.
The Environment
You're fine.
Protection Act 1990. And then there's just so many, all the regulations now, and the new regulations, the Environment Authorisation Scotland regulations 2018 and 2015, amended in 2015, which hopefully is draft at the moment, but hopefully that'll be going through soon as well. So we'll have those.
I remember my university was all about Control of Pollution Act 1974, and it was all about this is okay, but we've got this new Environment Protection Act coming in, and that's what we'll take forward. So for the people out there, I've only known the EPA, then there is one before that. It sits before that. So yeah. So talking about legislation consultations, SEPA have a consultation out about the proposed environmental performance assessment scheme. It's how it's trying to get a fair way of reporting and how businesses are meeting their responsibilities in terms of the environment. I'll be fairly honest, I've only had a skim read of it. The consultation runs to the 30th of June. And as usual, it's up in the usual portals, and we will share the link.
And there's more consultation with Scottish Government looking for the extension of the upcoming ban on landfilling biodegradable municipal waste. Now, when I first read this, I thought, oh no, surely they're not extending the timescale again. But it wasn't about that at all. It's to do with looking at the rural food waste exemption, trying to bring that to have a look and see whether or not they can extend the exemption or release the exemption so more rural collections can be brought in. So, I mean, that's existed since 2012. Is that still the right approach? Can we actually, start collecting food waste from a lot more areas? And then the other thing is about collection of textiles, looking at how we can collect textiles which contribute to around 32% of the carbon emissions from household waste in Scotland. So how would we prevent that? Interesting. Whether we collect at curbside or household waste recycling centres. And then the other one, which is I think interesting, is extension of the upcoming ban on landfill biodegradable municipal waste, was talking about including non-municipal biodegradable waste, so including commercial, industrial biodegradable waste as well. Which, yeah, we'll see what happens.
It's quite an interesting one, Jane, because I think areas like Aviemore, for example, are exempt from having to collect food waste, and it just seems madness when there is now, initially the exemptions were put in place because there weren't treatment outlets for that food waste, but now there's a pretty good network of either treatment facilities or collection facilities. So it'll be interesting the results of that.
Yeah, things have moved on, haven't they?
Yeah. Landfill ban is appearing as a bit of a hot topic. I could see it back in the agenda. So lots and lots of discussion about commercial operators struggling to get POPs waste into incinerations at the moment. So this is waste generally furniture with persistent organic pollutants, and that now needs to be incinerated, but some of the commercial operators are really struggling. And then obviously with the landfill ban looming, they're all a bit concerned about getting incineration capacity for that commercial waste. So I think generally the local authorities have got their incineration sorted out, but I think there's a looming crisis with commercial operators. So I think we'll be in the next few months we'll be talking about landfill ban a bit more is where I'm thinking is heading.
Yes, and that consultation kind of closes on 17th of June, so we've still got quite a bit of time to go through that and have a look.
Yeah. And then just a minor one from ourselves that we're still trying to get to the bottom of, and it's partly to do with the reporting to SEPA and the public accessibility of the reporting. So we appear to have been told that we can't have anybody's name on the report for GDPR reasons, because then that'll be made public. Now, I don't know about you, Jane, but if you Google my name, I'm all over the place in terms of where, I don't think my name's particularly protected, so I don't see why I wouldn't put my name in the bottom of my report. And I don't think that breaches any GDPR.
Yeah, it does seem a bit strange because a report is a report.
Yeah. So it's how we, how do we issue reports and formally say they've been formally issued if we're not allowed to put somebody's name at the bottom? That I can understand if they don't want a signature or something like that. I can understand that, but not the name. So we will try and get to the bottom of that, where that's come from, and if it's just a general thing or somebody going a bit haywire and it's not really a proper thing. So. Yep. Apart from that, what else do we have? I was meeting royalty last week. Did you hear about that, Jane?
Well, yes. Not that you said a few times, but the name dropping.
I don't think I mentioned it in the podcast. Did I?
No, you didn't actually.
I think I wasn't allowed to. I don't think I was allowed to mention it. It was all top secret. I was sworn to secrecy. So this was Charles Gray, who's based up in the northeast coast near Port Soy, and he has an excellent composting operation. So he takes food waste, composts it, applies it to land, grows seed potatoes and barley. He's got an amazing system in terms of how they manage their fields, in terms of sampling the soil quality, working out what nutrition level does, and it's all tracked by satellite. So the tractor drivers don't even really need to drive. The tractor does it all, and it puts a different fertilizer rate or amount of compost down depending on what the field's needing. So really amazing facility, and he's just invested about £2 million on an automated potato harvesting equipment. Not potato sorting equipment, because they sell seed potatoes halfway around the world. So really interesting tech it uses, actually, that I think potentially an application for some of the recycling plants, how it works. It photographs a potato and works out what it is, and then drops it into a basket, and then that basket can be dropped off at like 12 different places depending on the quality.
Yeah,
so I could just envisage that with waste as well. So yeah, no, it's really clever tech. So
bit of AI there.
So I'm still trying to. No, there's lots of AI. It does something like, I can't remember how many photographs, but it's like something like 600 different photographs of the one tatty.
Wow,
so they're the most photographed tatties in the world, probably.
I was going to say, I don't think I'd like to see their holiday photos.
And what they reckon in 2 or 3 years' time, it'll not just be taking photographs of the outside of the potato, it'll also be photographing inside the tatty and working out if there's any defects in the potato. So the whole world is changing, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Anyway, did you actually tell us who you visited?
Princess Anne.
All right. Okay.
Princess Anne.
And did she shake your hand?
It was Princess Anne. So she did shake my hand, and sadly, I don't think there's actually any photographic evidence of me getting my hand shaken, because she's not particularly keen on photographers around her all the time. So it was very
quite low key
and organised, but she was very, very low key. She was extremely polite, as you would expect. She was very well versed. She was very knowledgeable about environmental matters, about farming, all that sort of stuff. So no, really, real good, lively conversation with her, and yeah, and interesting, very interesting visit. And we made two pals we'd had lunch before the visit, so we had some spare sandwiches. So we went over to the two police officers who were the drivers. We went and made friends with them by offering them some free lunch. So they were most they were most grateful for their sandwiches and their cup of tea. So yeah,
Not surprised.
but it was actually it was fascinating talking to them about just how they work in terms of the security detail and how it all works and so on. They weren't giving the secrets away, but they were explaining how the security arrangements around getting her from A to B and so on. So yeah, it was fascinating.
My
Yep.
excitement at the weekend, was it last weekend, was visiting our local waste recycling centre. I was cleaning it, right,
Oh,
and I'm having a bit.
you were one of moan, Jane.
I am. I'm going to have a bit of a moan, a bit of a rant because, I had loads of stuff to clear, a big van full of stuff, and I did the right thing, booked it in, and all this sort of stuff. Gets there, and there's like this barrier, so the guys in the little hut. I mean, lovely day, nice and warm, sunny, not raining. Guys in the little hut obviously must have taken the note of it, and that was it. You're like, right, okay, now where do we go? There's very, very little signage. The site's really small, so it's got like a little bit for, your sofas, a massive bit for wood, and it's just like so totally disorganised, or it feels like it. No signage, nothing. Nobody came out. They didn't come out of their little hut once to, we don't expect them to
What were
help.
you on the hand? Were
Well,
you on the
no,
hand or something?
we had so much stuff in there. It was like, well, where'd you put this? Where'd you put that? Because there was nothing obvious. It's like there was a place for little electrical equipment, but you had to sort of like search for it. There's no signs or anything. So yeah, I was a bit kind of. I think it was probably the worst run waste recycling centre I have ever been to.
Ah.
There you go. It's my rant over.
I was going to say, Jane, it's quite sad. It's quite sad that in this day and age we've not got basic signage at these sort of sites.
No,
It's not a huge cost to put proper signage and at least give people the right message. So yeah, not
no,
good.
it wasn't good.
Not good. What else have we got? I don't think we've got anything else really, apart from the usual. Give us a like, give us a share, give us a comment. We'll love to hear from people.
Have a look on TikTok. We're there.
Yep, we're on TikTok. Occasionally we appear on LinkedIn, and if you've got anything to get in touch with, anything more complicated that kind of go on social media, hello@rubbishtalk.co.uk. So as I said at the start, this week's interview with Bryce Cunningham, who is a farmer. So myself and Jane learned lots about cows that we didn't actually know. So I'll save that surprise till later on. But the work Bryce has been doing in the sustainability space in terms of dairy is quite fascinating. It's a really, really good conversation with Bryce. So it took us a while to try. We have been trying to get him for a while. We finally tracked him down. But no, an excellent conversation with Bryce and some of the challenges he faces, both from the dairy side and trying to do that sustainability stuff when you're putting stuff in the market.
And making money at the same time. And running a business.
Well, exactly. I'm trying to stay profitable.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So over to myself, Jane, and Bryce.
Hi, Bryce. Welcome to Rubbish Talk.
Hi, thanks for the invite. It's great to be on.
Yeah,
Hi, Bryce.
we've got a lot to talk about actually because you're not our run-of-the-mill waste person. We were talking about a little bit on the edge of the waste industry, so it would be really, really good if you could just tell us all about your business and what you've been doing over the past few years in terms of the sustainability agenda. That'd be great.
No problem. So I'm Bryce from Mossgiel Farm. I'm the founder of the Mossgiel Dairy as well. I'm also the third generation dairy farmer on our family farm, and we have a small coffee shop over in Stewarton. And the reason we exist is to do something different within the dairy industry. So we were bankrupted in 2015 when the milk price collapsed. My father died and our milk buyer went out of business. And I felt that as a farmer at that time, I felt very strongly that I didn't like the way that dairy was going, but the direction it was going. A few very large companies owned all of the dairy industry and we wanted to fight back. And we chose to do that through organic agriculture. So that's working with organic cows from land that's not had any fertilisers or chemicals put on it. Working in collaboration with other farmers. So we work with 5 other farms and doing everything we can as sustainably as we can. So, as I say, we started off with organic agriculture. We use a lot of renewable technology on the farm to brew our milk. So we don't pasteurise the milk, we brew the milk so we can do it at a lower temperature and utilise more sustainable renewable technology within that. When we sell and deliver the milk, we do so in a way that we can use reusable packaging so we can guarantee that there's no waste other than broken bottles or tubs that's come at the end of their life. And ultimately, we can do everything in such a sustainable way that we've cut our packaging by 95%, and we've cut our emissions by over 87% as a dairy farm. So there's lots of things we do that. I'm sure we'll come up in conversation, but we're using different things like using only reusable containers, using biodegradable where reusable can't be used. We've got electric vehicles that are powered by solar panels. We've got biomass technology on the farm so that we can use all the hot water that's produced on the farm in a sustainable way. And we're also composting as well, so we're actually taking items from other industries to compost on the farm, which we then use as fertiliser for the fields in an organic way. And in the future we want to invest in this area so we can actually utilise the methane that's produced from that composting process to run other things like electricity, like contained gas to run vehicles and things like that. So we've got a big mission ahead and a big vision, and we're very much on the journey for it just now.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. Can I go back? You were talking about vehicles, solar-powered vehicles. How does that? I mean, obviously, I kind of know how that works, but are those like tractors and things like that? What kind of vehicles are those?
So it's with delivery vans. We've got 9 vehicles in our fleet, and 6 of them are electric. So they're battery electric vans. So they're all charged on the farm, and we've got an array of solar panels as well. So I can't sit and say that 365 days a year we're getting the solar energy into them, but we're over.
You certainly are at the moment, Bryce.
Well,
we are today, anyway, yep.
The old solar's been going great in Ayrshire for the last week.
It certainly has. I've got a wee app on my phone that tells me when we're overproducing. That's been pinging all the time. So
well, we've been over. We were 100% renewable all last week, and I'm just looking at our. That's my Tesla battery just charged up to 100%, and it's only 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
I know, it's pretty handy, yep.
Yeah, sorry I got completely confused then. I was just imagining these vehicles driving around with solar panels on the roof. That was why I was like...
I had a feeling you were thinking that, Jane.
I was. It was powered by solar panels. And I thought, that's really good. I like that idea, but obviously we haven't quite got there yet. If we could do that, I'd
I don't know quite that far yet. Maybe one day,
yeah, it might be a good idea. Yeah, so lots of sustainability areas going on there. So you're linked up with 5 other farmers who are also organic farming as well, is that right? So then all the compost from theirs as well is always going to be organic, isn't it? So it's kind of like just a perpetual loop, that. Very circular.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So on the 5 other farms, they've got their own composting systems. So they've got their own, they've got the cow dung, they've got any waste materials like grass and things that's not fed to the cows, or the bedding. But what we've done is we went to SEPA and were organic certifiers with an idea about 4 or 5 years ago. And the idea was, could we take in the waste coffee from our coffee shop customers? We supply about 300 coffee shops across Scotland. And what we wanted to do is take the used grinds of coffee, mix it in with the cow dung and all the other sort of effectively waste products on the farm, and create a really rich compost out of it. So initially it turned out it was actually quite a difficult thing to do because SEPA didn't really have that box where you could put coffee onto a farm manure. So to sort of work with them and try and work out the best way to do it. And then we discovered that one of the UK's largest coffee roasters, and based 25 miles from us in Glasgow, called Matthew Algie. So we went to Matthew Algie. They had a problem whereby they had coffee to get rid of. It was a cost, and it was an issue for them. And we had a need for it to be able to make this really rich compost that we wanted in the farm, because coffee was a fantastic source of this type of compost we were looking for. So we did manage to do a deal. We collect the coffee every single time we're in Glasgow, which is 5 times a week. Bring it back to the farm, we compost it, we then use that compost to grow grass, which makes milk, which goes into coffees later on. So it's a circular system right from the get-go. And we've also went one step further. So one of our customers is Bare Bones Chocolate in Glasgow. They make this very, very high-end, very high-quality chocolate. and they're a bean to bar company, so they're buying the cocoa beans and they're making the actual products. And they've got the waste chocolate husks. Now, chocolate husks are, they smell absolutely amazing, but you would never eat them. They're the most bitter thing you would ever taste.
Really?
But what we discovered was we could put them into to giant tea bags, and we can infuse milk into a chocolate milk. So we could actually make basically a one ingredient infused chocolate milk. So we're able to take that waste product, make the chocolate milk, add a little bit of sugar in it just to sweeten it up a bit, and then we can compost the chocolate husks after that. So we've got these really, really rich chocolate husks, sort of milky chocolate husks, coffee, farmyard manure, which is your cow dung, your bedding, waste grass, any waste milk, which is very minimal to be fair, but it makes this incredible compost. It's almost as good as fertiliser for the land when you're sticking it on, because it feeds all these microbes so well. So we've got that. That's one of the projects that's been really successful on the farm for us.
I
Must be the
did.
best fed
Yeah.
cows between the coffee
Yeah.
husks and the chocolate.
I did know.
I did see on your website, on your LinkedIn about the chocolate milk. I was like, I wonder where that comes from. Not chocolate cows, obviously, but you know.
No, we did put a wee joke up 6 months ago saying we were bringing brown cow milk to the market, which was because of our brown cows, they produce the chocolate milk. But I think they caught a few folk out, but not that many.
So we normally ask our guests what brought them into the world of waste management, but I suppose this question for you is you probably say you're not in waste management, but what drove you towards that sustainability? Looking at everything from a sustainability perspective, and how easy has it been as you've been progressing things to follow that path?
So I know very clearly where my sort of passion came from. It was so before I was a farmer, I worked with Mercedes-Benz. So I was there for about 10 years, and I went to Germany a couple of times when I was with Mercedes. I was really, really interested in a lot of the things that Mercedes were doing at the time. So one of the things they were doing just at the end of my career was they had launched a new Mercedes SL with an aluminium chassis. And they were very proud of the fact that they'd managed to open this factory and turn waste aluminium cans into certain components for this car. So that was really what I was interested in. Also, when I was in Germany, I was fascinated by their whole circular economy. The way they were approaching it anyway. You go to Berlin and there's no litter in the streets because there's people actually picking them up to take them to shops to get money back on them from the deposit return scheme. When you went to businesses, there was skips everywhere with labels on them because everybody was so regimented in sorting their waste before they went to the recyclers, and everything was all sort of ready to go. I was really, really interested in it as well, and that's also where my interest in organics came from too, because Germany is one of the world leaders in organic consumption as well. So I was really, really interested in it from my time in the car industry. When I came back to the farm, but the reason I came back to the farm is because we discovered that my father and my grandfather, both business partners, were diagnosed with terminal illnesses within a couple of months of each other. So that sort of brought me back to the farm. And then when we effectively went bankrupt, that was when I thought to myself, that this model was not working for us. We had to do something different. And when I was starting to think back to my time at Mercedes, I thought, could we bring that to our industry? And then, that was also the time that the animal rights movement was really starting to shout about things. And I thought, this is a time that we could show that small scale dairy can be fantastic, and here's why. We can implement all these sustainability metrics. We can start doing different things with the cows. So I appreciate it's not the focus of this podcast, but we do something called cow with calf farming.
I was just about to ask you about that. I'm intrigued with that one. I've seen that in your LinkedIn.
Yep. So that's where we keep the cows and calves together. We're one of only 2 dairies in Scotland doing so just now. We're doing lots of different things in the fields as well. So using this compost, for example, we have quite a large waste in the plastic wrapping we use for the silage bales for the cows, and we're able to send them away. They're recycled, and we buy that back as fencing stabs. So we've got a circular economy aspect there. So basically, we just wanted to look at the entire supply chain, everything we do as a business, everything we do as farmers, and sort of try and tick the sustainability box to show people that actually small scale farming can be very, very sustainable, and that's the whole sort of focus of the business.
So where's the benefit with your cow to calf scheme? Where's the bit? Obviously, the welfare of the animals is probably better, but I presume in terms of milk production, it's less than you would normally get, or is it?
Yep. So when you're doing a spreadsheet, every metric you can think of is terrible for cow and calf farming.
So that's why you're doing it then, obviously.
So basically the calves will take about a third of all the milk the cows will produce. So as dairy farmers, your main income's from milk. That's a terrible idea. But where we sort of looked at it was there was two main things for it. So as I was growing the business, we're effectively a bankrupt business. No one was giving us any capital to grow. That was just not happening. So we had to look at different things. So I could either focus my time as a farmer, or I could focus my time in pasteurising and selling and delivering milk. And it got to the stage where I just couldn't do everything. So it was, one of the things was, how do I reduce my workload? And I thought, well, if I'm looking after the calves' natural food is milk from cows. I don't need to buy in feed for them because they're getting fed. They've been looked after by the cows. I can reduce my workload there. At the same time, there was lots of this animal rights thing happening. The number one thing was don't eat meat. The number two thing was dairy takes calves away from their mothers. And me being me, the very stubborn person that I am, I thought, if everybody tells me I can't do something, I will go and do it just to see if it works. So it was a case of, those two things sort of mixed in together. And as times went on, over the past 10 years, we've lost an awful lot of dairy farms in the UK. So since the day I was born, that number's 33,000. Now, it's actually increasing. So last year alone, we lost 450 farms in 1 year.
Wow.
So the industry is not so much dying, but the industry is amalgamating. So all the farms are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the more traditional farms have been put out of business. But then on the flip side, we're seeing the average age of farmers going up. So I think the average age of farmers is now between 55 and 60. But we've got a massive amount of people that want to get into farming. So you're seeing thousands and thousands of people that want to get in, but they can't get in because they're either in the wrong area, or there's no local farms to help them out, or when they want to actually start their own farm, the going rate to start a farm nowadays is between sort of £3 and £5 million by the time you buy a farm or rent a farm and buy cows, machinery, milking parlours, tractors. It's a crazy, crazy amount of money. So where I feel the opportunity is for cow with calf farming is there's lots of small farms still out there, so they're now being used as equestrian centres, or people from the city that moved out during COVID that are now moving back. There's this sort of small pockets of land here, there and everywhere. We could go to them and say, look, why don't we have a small herd of cows, do the cow with calf system, be organic, we'll be the platform for you to sell your milk into. We can then guarantee you a higher price because we've got a better relationship with the consumer than what Big Dairy has, because Big Dairy just puts milk in a plastic bottle and expects you to pay whatever they say for it. We want this connection where we can connect the consumer with the farmer, and through that whole system I honestly feel that today we could offer an opportunity to new entrants and perhaps retirees of a different way to dairy, with a way that the consumers can really connect with the farmers. And even to such an extent where these farms can open up and have sort of farm days to invite people onto it to see what they do, to let people who are drinking the milk or eating that dairy product meet the cows and the people behind it. That's the sort of big vision I have, is to really sort of back up small scale farming. That's a big vision that I want to sort of try and realise, if you like.
Sounds brilliant.
Sounds brilliant. Isn't it?
And your whole
Yeah.
your whole journey, what's been your favourite role or project, the one you're most proud of so far?
So far, the proudest I am is when we were able to supply schools with our milk. So that was back in 2021, and not just schools, but sort of larger workplaces as well. So we worked with East Ayrshire Council, and we worked with a big company called Baxter Story, and basically as a small dairy, these entities don't bother with us. We're a small dairy, they're a big company. There's usually no cohesion there. But what we found was that these big companies have a huge problem just now. They've got a huge waste problem, and that is that they're paying a lot of money to get rid of single-use items they get delivered on a Monday, they're thrown out on a Tuesday because that's the packaging done with. And they've got sustainability metrics like everybody else out there. They've got their UN Sustainable 17 goals that that are targeted on. The Scottish Government came out with a Good Food Nation Bill 2022 to say that they have to prioritise organic and have to prioritise high nutrition, get rid of fat, get rid of sugar, all these sort of big targets they've got. And I thought to myself, this is something that we could actually help these larger entities with. We can do the no single-use plastic waste through our reusable buckets. In the bigger places like schools, for example, we can put vending machines in so that children can walk up and use reusable cups to dispense their milk into, instead of single-use plastic that survives for 4 or 5 hours away from the factory. And then also from a sustainability point of view, if we can record everything that we're doing and actually put a number to it, we can show that our carbon footprint is X, Y and Z. We can tell them where the milk's coming from. We can work with them really closely. And today we're now supplying just over 100 schools and nurseries and various things like that. supply 4 Scottish universities across all their campuses, and even really, really big banks in different places like that. It's been a really, really interesting journey. So we're really proud that not just that we were able to step up and meet their demand, but also that they took a chance on us to sort of show that our system can work at that level.
On a practical level, how do you actually deliver the milk in bulk?
So we've got these 5 litre buckets. So I don't know if you've ever walked into like a coffee shop or a cafe and they've got these, mayonnaise buckets, these 5 litre mayonnaise buckets. So that was the inspiration that I had from them. But the big problem was we were pouring milk. So how were we going to do that? So what we did was we created a system whereby there's a UK manufacturer makes 5 litre buckets of BPA-free plastic, and that was important so that when we washed the buckets, it didn't leach any microplastics or plastics into the buckets themselves. We've then got a pouring lid, so that's specially made so that we deliver the milk with transport lids. When it gets to the end user, they put a pouring lid on it, so they can put this lid on with a little spout. They can then pour it normally like just a normal 2 litre plastic jug. And then once they've used that, they rinse it out, they stack them up in a big pile, and then we pick them up for the next run. So when we're delivering the fresh milk, we're taking away the buckets, bringing them back to farm, washing them, sterilising them, refilling them and closing the loop. We've worked out that we generally get about 50 to 70 uses out of these buckets before they crack or they break or they become sort of unsightly kind of thing. So we then work with Lomac over in Irvine to be able to get those buckets away and recycled, and we just keep the loop going. So that's what we're all kind of working with.
Sounds absolutely fascinating, Bryce. How much interest have you had from other farmers?
We've had quite a lot. So very mixed reviews from other farmers.
Saying you're an idiot. Why when you do cow and calf?
Yeah. So basically, some of them are very, very interested. We generally host 4 or 5 groups of farmers a year to come and see what we're doing. And other ones think that we're tree huggers and we're absolutely mental. So it's a very mixed bag of reviews. Yeah.
Yeah. What is you were talking earlier about pasteurised and brewed, or what did you say? You brew your milk rather than pasteurise it. What's the difference?
That's right. So effectively, we call it brewing. It is effectively pasteurisation, but it's just a very, very different way of doing it. So just to give you an idea, in Scotland, the sale of raw milk is banned. So you literally cannot buy raw milk. In England you can, but in Scotland you can't. And the reason you can't in Scotland is because in the 1980s we had the highest rate of E. coli infections caused by milk and meat. So that's why that law was passed. It's never changed. So you have to pasteurise milk in Scotland, and pasteurising is quite a simple thing. You basically heat milk up to a temperature, you hold it there for a certain time, and then you cool it back down, and that's it, pasteurised. It's to kill the bugs. It's like cooking anything, like cooking burgers or anything like that. It's just cooking it effectively. Now, it was invented way back in the 1800s by a Frenchman whose surname was Pasteur, so that's where pasteurised came from. And the way that he created it was for wine, to pasteurise wine. And he had created it in this way. It took forever to do it. It was very slow, but it sort of got the food safety thing ticked off. Over the past 100 years, big companies have managed to make this system very, very efficient, very effective, very fast, and get the cost down. But it takes away, the whole process takes away the flavour and nutrition of milk. So milk's a very, very unique thing. It's got every single amino acid we need to remain healthy. It's a really, really high in protein, high in energy. It's a great food product. But the more you work with it, the less nutrition it has, just by way of how it's made up. So what I did was I sort of took a bit of inspiration from the way that Louis Pasteur had come up with this process. And I sort of looked at the way Big Dairy were doing it and decided I didn't want to do that because I wanted the experience of being able to, when I come back to the farm, I was drinking raw milk because farmers legally can drink it, and I was loving the taste of it. I hated supermarket milk while I was away working with Mercedes. And I wanted to bring that experience to the local community and other people out there. So I looked at the way that Louis Pasteur was doing it. I didn't really know how I was going to build these machines, so I based them on how a Mercedes-Benz cooled its gearbox. That was the whole sort of idea that I had. That was my inspiration. And we basically got this new way of doing it where we could use this really inefficient way of pasteurising that was the original way to do it, but we could make it very, very efficient in a modern way. So that's why when you taste Mossgiel milk today, it tastes very, very different. And we call it brewing because it does take longer. It does take us about 10 minutes per batch, whereas Big Dairy can do it in 15 seconds, sorry. So it's quite inefficient compared to them, but the flavour and the nutrition difference is dramatic. And it's so dramatic, actually, that When we supply milk into coffee shops, when they're frothing that milk for, use in one of their espresso drinks, for example, the barista can use that milk to create latte art, which is going to stay in that cup much, much longer than what supermarket milk does. And it also complements the flavour of the coffee, and it's slightly sweeter, so you can put less sugar in. So the whole experience of drinking that specialty coffee in a coffee shop is very, very different to using supermarket milk. And that's one of the reasons that we've managed to grow the business so significantly over the past 10 years.
Wow. Gosh, there's lots of different ways of doing things, Bryce. You've been busy researching. There's a lot of research going on there. So, have you had, throughout your research and all the innovations, have you had any disasters? Have you had any funny stories, where things have not gone right, but to be honest, they're quite funny because they've not gone right?
Yeah, but we've had many, many, many disasters. Yep. So I suppose our first big disaster, I suppose, was I was doing a lot of research into something called herbal leys and multi-species leys. So, but that's just basically a fancy way of saying that we were planting lots of different plants in the fields. So I'd been reading this research where we were trying to sort of bring back the life of our soils organically after 70 or 80 years of having fertiliser spread on them. So a lot of my research showed that if we plant lots of different types of plants in the same area, then these plants start growing their own fungi again, so that a very natural fungi, and that starts cycling nutrients between each other. So effectively the plants start working with each other to use photosynthesis to grow, so you don't need the fertiliser and all the inputs that farmers use today. So I was really excited by this, and I was going to change the world with this whole idea. So I went and spoke to a few people, and they gave me some ideas about what plants we should be planting and all this kind of thing. And I got the list, and then I read somewhere else that mustard was really good for cows' health, and I thought, oh, I'll add mustard into that mixture as well. So I ended up planting like 15 different types of seeds on this land. It grew great, everything went well. We made it into hay for the cows for the winter, and then what I didn't realise was once I fed this to the cows, it tainted the milk and made the milk taste like mustard. So in 2018, I had to actually stop milking my cows completely and buy milk in from other farms because all of my milk tasted like mustard, and it was absolutely horrible, and nobody wanted to drink it. That was one of the biggest mistakes I made. So all the cows went on holiday for 6 months until we used up all this haylage and this silage that we had. So that was a bit of a disaster. Another massive disaster that I had was, I could go on all day about disasters, but I've just focused these two. The second big disaster I had was maybe not quite so funny, but in 2021, was when we got the schools contract, and we thought, oh, this is it. We've got a schools contract. We're going to be able to grow the business. Everything's going great. We'll change the world. And I went to the Scottish Government and says, look, I feel that we've got this huge opportunity to really do something big, support more farms, deliver this milk across the UK. Will you help me out? My big blocker is here. I need a new dairy. And they said, actually, yes, there's a grant system there. We'll help you out. We'll give you a 40% grant to build this new dairy. This new dairy was going to be all singing and dancing. I had to get match funding for it, which I was working with a bank and a couple of private investors and the Scottish National Investment Bank to do it. So I was really, really excited. And I was so excited, I went and spent an absolute fortune on consultants and planning and design and building standards and all this kind of thing, all that kind of fun stuff. And then right at the very last minute, when everything was all to be signed off, the phone started going quiet, because this is when the cost of living crisis started happening. And the Scottish Government were all ready to go, and our investors got a little bit shaky, and nothing happened. And then we went over the deadline for the Scottish Government grant, and we very nearly finished ourselves because we spent so much money on consultancy and all this kind of thing. So that put us into over a year of a cash crisis, which we only just managed to get out of about 7 or 8 months ago. So my lesson from that one is certainly don't be spending money on fancy things while you're still waiting on an investment coming in. So
yeah,
that was a huge blow
don't
for
spend
us,
it until you've got it.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. So we've made lots of mistakes, but we need to go over it, put it behind us,
You
and
learn
keep
by your
cracking on to the
mistakes
next
as
business,
well,
so.
don't you? And I love the mustard one.
Bryce, how do you find selling that sustainability goal to people? Do you find that people are receptive, or do you find sometimes people are like, as you say, you're a tree hugger, and how do you find that balance between selling what you're doing?
It gets very mixed reactions. So it really depends who the person is you're talking to. So what I generally find is, if I can bring someone onto the farm and take them round and show them. They leave here very inspired and very bought into what we're trying to do and wanting to do better and things. If you go to an event or you talk about it on social media, you fall into a category of, you're just another business trying to do something that everybody else is doing. But the thing that is really beginning to sort of grate on me a little bit is the greenwashing that's out there. I feel that we're doing all this stuff on the farm, trying to really, really push it. And then you open your laptop and you see somebody advertising that they're doing something very similar, and it's just a whole load of rubbish. So one of the big things, for example, is other dairies, they'll say, oh, we're doing glass bottles and we've saved this amount of plastic from the wheelie bin, and we're great and this, that, and the next thing. And fine well that 95% of those sales are 2-litre plastic bottles that is getting used like every other dairy in the country, and this tiny little proportion of their business is this glass pint bottle. And then when it gets to Christmas time, when the pressure's on, when everybody's ordering a bit more milk, the people that normally get the glass, they'll start getting, the occasional plastic pint on there. It's a little bit of an excuse. It's a wee bit of a kind of marketing thing. But for us, we don't use any single-use plastic. It's absolutely core part of our values. I suppose greenwashing really sort of really grates on me. So much that it's actually nearly got into trouble last week. So I was in Denmark at the International Dairy Innovation Conference, and it was huge businesses. It was the biggest businesses in the world that were attending this thing. And so I was asked to speak. So I sat on stage, and it was kind of talking about it back and forward, and I had a little bit of a rant, and I get pulled to the side after it. And a couple of these companies weren't very chuffed at what I was saying on the stage. So, so I'm obviously ruffling feathers.
You'll not be invited back next year.
I'm not be back in a hurry yet, especially when I kind of called them out. They had obviously it was a dairy conference. There was big dairies there, and I kind of called them out because it took them over an hour to say the word farmer, and over an hour and a half to say the word cow at a dairy conference. So I didn't make many friends that day, but it was an interesting journey all the same. But
we've I think just a couple of episodes ago we were talking about. Is it Cravendale milk that's in the white plastic bottle that the recycling plants can't put that plastic bottle in the right place because it's white?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
just the fact they've got a different coloured bottle compared to everybody else out there just makes life difficult for the recyclers.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the big topics at this conference we were at was talking about the cartons, the milk cartons. So where they've got 3 or 4 different layers of product on them to obviously keep the food safe, but then for marketing as well. So the big thing in Denmark was that they've now basically, they haven't fully, but they're basically trying to stop the recycling to put them into these waste to energy plants, and the same in Germany. And then in the UK, all you hear about is, you see these cartons on the shelf and they're all saying, 70% less plastic or 90% less plastic or fully recyclable and all this. And all the councils are doing this great work to get them back. But actually, when you look at the overall market, it's a very, very small percentage of these that are being recycled. And that's actually one of my current projects just now is I know for a fact that there's a recycling plant in Halifax that does these cartons. But they're not at capacity, they're nowhere near it because the councils are just not in the ball with these collections, but the consumers are also not in the ball because they think it's paper, it's just not linking up. So we've had this idea where if we packaged milk into these cartons, could we find a way of being able to guarantee those cartons come back to the farm here? We could bale them and then deliver them down to Halifax so we basically become the recyclers as much as recyclers do. So we're sort of looking at that project just now, and that's quite an exciting one. We've spoken to a couple of the carton manufacturers on it, but you're absolutely right. It's like if one dairy does something different and then it can't be recycled, is that better or worse than what the rest of the industry is doing? So it's quite an interesting one.
Absolutely. So how do you get away from the work in the farm, or do you?
It's a rare occasion, to be honest. It's where I lived through that wall, so my office is through the wall, and then their side of the wall's the cows. So it's an all-consuming thing. But no, when I met my wife 6 years ago, the agreement was that if she was to move in, then I was to take 1 day away from the farm the first year, 2 days the next year, 3 days the next year. So we're now up to 7 days holiday this year. So
your poor wife, 7 days holiday, Bryce.
We managed to go to Paris last year, so that was quite exciting for us. So. And I didn't have to come home early because nothing broke, so that was quite good too.
Even better, that's a tick in the box. So what's next, really? I mean, what's your next sort of project or your next sort of goal in your farming side of it? Where do you see yourself in 10 years, or see yourself and the farm and the business in 10 years' time or something?
Yep. So the big thing for us just now is we're basically we're looking for significant growth. So where I feel that we are is, I feel that we've proved our concept. I feel that we've got this brewed milk. We can do it in a sustainable way. We can support small scale farms and deliver the value back that they need to farm sustainably. And we've got the platform now that we need to go further. We've got some very, very significant demand all across Scotland, in fact, all across the UK actually, that we actually just can't meet right now because we don't have a new dairy built, which we're very much working towards. So what we did was back in November, and Alistair's one of our investors, we did a crowdfunding campaign to raise some money to help us on that journey. So we've been able to upgrade our dairy, which gives us more capacity. That then helps keep our costs down. We can deliver more value back to both our shareholders and our farmers. And we can go further afield. So right now we're speaking to wholesalers up and down the country. We're looking at different sort of ways of packaging the milk. So as I mentioned there about these cartons, can we do these cartons in a UK-wide way that's going to be truly recyclable, where we can guarantee that recyclability? Or do we look at other ideas of reusable packaging up and down the country? The big problem with reusable packaging when we get further away from Scotland is the return leg of the journey. So if we are sending out, say, 5 litre buckets all the way down to London, for example, getting those buckets back is effectively, it's not dead money as such, but it's a lorry that can be better utilised somewhere else. Whereas if we can use things like cartons, we can flat pack the cartons, you can fit much more packaging on a lorry on the way back up the road and make it A, more cost effective, but B, more sustainable as well, because you're cutting the carbon cost of that as well. So these are the things we're looking at, is how do we grow the business sustainably. We're also investing in different equipment at the farm. So one of the big problems we have is, because we pasteurise the milk so differently to everyone else, no one can really just come in and say, there's a bigger pasteuriser, there's a bigger machine for this, a bigger machine for that. We've got to design it, plan it and build it ourselves. So we're now looking at different systems to cool the milk better so that we can get a slightly better shelf life without affecting nutrition. We're looking at how the protein can be absorbed within the milk as well and how we pasteurise it. So we're doing a study just now with SRUC to see the actual benefit or non-benefit of the milk itself. And we're also looking at other products. So we've just launched our chocolate milk this year, our brown cow milk. We're about to do another product in the next 5 weeks and another product again in September, both of which I think a lot of our supporters are very excited about, but I can't tell you what it is yet. So so we've got a very, very busy 12 months ahead, so we're very excited.
Sounds like it. I don't think you're going to be able to take your 7 days holiday, are you? You're going to be too busy.
I might struggle, yeah.
So is there a fact or anything from your sector you think people might want to hear, you might want to share? Any statistics?
Well, a very silly one. And it's a very, very silly one that I didn't realise until my last day at Mercedes. So I come back here. My dad was still alive and working on the farm, and we were giving cows some vaccines. So the way you do it is you hold the cow's mouth, you pull the vaccine down into its mouth, and it swallows it. And that was the first time in my life I realised that cows don't have top teeth; they've got big gums. So and when I said to my dad, like, that cow's not got any teeth. And my dad was rolling about the floor laughing. And I thought, it made me feel that stupid. I thought, I'm going to tell everybody that cows don't have top teeth. So that's
I never knew that.
One fact. And
I never knew that either, Bryce. I never thought about that.
So how do we choose a grass?
I know, but growing up in the farm for 16 years, I didn't know that, so my dad wasn't very impressed. So
is that different? Sheep have got top teeth as well, haven't they?
Yeah, sheep have got top teeth. Yeah.
But cows don't. I never knew that.
I'm going to be looking at cows
when I'm trying to get through the gate and when I'm on a run and they're all crowding around me, I'll need to have a wee closer look.
Yes.
No, so I found that hilarious. I tell everybody that story. So
that's we've not had that one. That's a new one for us, I'll tell you.
Definitely.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we always ask all our guests for their favourite bit of slang or dialect, but being from Ayrshire, you might have more than one, I would think.
Well, absolutely, yeah. So, so one of the things we haven't spoken about is one of the more exciting things that happens in the farm here. So we're farming the land that Robert Burns farmed on very self, way back in 1794. He was on Mossgiel farm when he launched his book of poems and became quite famous. And so it's not so much a piece of slang or a dialect, it's a saying, and it's, I'm truly sorry man's dominion has broken nature's social union. And that came from his poem To a Mouse. And I keep going back to that one because it's so incredible to me that he was here on this farm over 200 years ago, and he was talking about biodiversity loss. He was talking about how we were treating our animals. He was talking about how we were overcoming nature all a way back then. I think, and what we are doing today to try and be sustainable and all the different things we're trying to be innovative with, I think it just resonates so well with the farm. So I always really take a lot of pride in that particular line of his poems. Yeah, it's really interesting.
I like that. I like that too. How big a temptation was it to sort of brand the business around Burns, or was there a temptation to make a connection, or is it just a sort of loose thing?
And initially that was what. So initially when I started telling people what we were going to do, I'm like, oh, it's the milk that Rabbie Burns would have drank. It's Ayrshire cows. It's, we do this brewing method to keep the raw milk, and that was kind of what we were thinking at the time. But as times went on, it's become less and less. We still have Rabbie on my logo. We rebranded last year, and we decided to keep him. The guy that was doing my logo is like, oh no, you need to keep Rabbie, but we'll give you your own Rabbie. So he's got Rabbie that's got flowing hair and a wee bit of different facial features and things. But it's quite fun. It's not the mainstay of the business. However, when you actually think about what Rabbie stood for, he's talking about, he's talking about the environment. He was talking about, the way people were treated. He was talking about, just everything he speaks about back in his poems is something that we resonate with. Even in different poems where he talks about, give me a spark of nature's fire. That's all the learning I desire. It's all about how nature works and how we are part of nature, and it's really, really interesting. So I think that's, I think it's just really, really interesting as part of the business, but it's not the mainstay of the business. I think it's cool to talk about and cool that it was happening, but now we've moved on. We're doing something different. So.
Yeah. I think the thing with Rabbie Burns, though, is you actually need a translator to work out what he's saying.
Jane struggles with it.
Yeah, so I remember when the kids were at school and it was, Burns, and they did Burns poems and all this sort of stuff. I was like, that's great, but I have no idea what you're talking about. But so that's really interesting that because I've got Ode to the Mouse before, but I've never really, thought about what the words mean.
That's what YouTube's excellent for nowadays, Jane.
Absolutely, yeah. Even ChatGPT knows how to translate.
Absolutely.
Really? Okay, I'll try that one.
So we're going to give all our guests a magic wand to do something in their sector they would like resolved at the swoop of a magic wand. What would you like to use it for?
I would sort out the cartons problem that I spoke about. I think that these milk cartons are such a source of huge waste and all around the world. It's I can't remember the stats, but something crazy like only 4% are actually make it into recycling. And I think that the fact that they can be done in such a way that we can reuse all the plastic from that to be made into more cartons. We can do it in such a way that's very low in carbon, and we just need the consumer buy-in for it, and also the councils and all the waste holders to be able to sort of actually have a system that works. If I could have a magic wand, that's the one waste item I would fix.
As we've chatted many times in this podcast, that's a challenge in itself. It's just the whole logistics of getting the public to do what they should be doing and get the material back to where it needs to be at the right cost. Really, that's the challenge.
Yes, it's always a challenge, isn't it? And my last question, finally, what advice would you give the younger generation coming into the sector? Do you see? I think you were talking about before about the employment and younger people looking to come into the business and to farming. What sort of advice would you give them? Apart from don't feed the cows mustard.
Yeah, don't do that. Yeah, definitely not. I would say that if there was people that was watching this are really interested in farming, I would say, start reaching out to the industry. We're not all sort of, coming up to retirement, grumpy old guys running about in Range Rover shouting at folk. It's not that. That's not the industry. The industry is really exciting. It's really full of innovation. There's robotics happening in fields. There's loads of things happening with cows. There's real massive opportunity to do something pretty incredible in this industry. And I think a lot of people are turned off because they see this stereotype farmer that is just not true. So I'd say that, start, if you're really interested in it, start watching the social media. There's lots of people doing social media that's doing really, really great things. Go and speak to your local farmer, get involved in some of the local stuff. But the caveat to that is, I've actually literally this week just put a job advert up for someone to come and help out with the cows. So we're growing the herd a little bit. We're needing a bit more help in the farm. And we're looking for another, what we call cow happiness manager, to come and make sure our cows are happy and look after our calves and drive the occasional tractor. And you know that it's been really enlightening because I haven't advertised for anybody for that position for about 4 or 5 years, and at the time I couldn't get anybody to apply. I'm sitting here with about 50 or 60 applications of people, and all the cover notes start off with, "I really love cows and I love what you're trying to do," and they want to be involved in the story. Whereas, you know, but like sort of even 4 or 5 years ago, you just couldn't get anybody to come and look after your cows for you. It's an incredible change to see, and I think that has been the change in social media, the focus that people have and where their food's coming from, and just people actually talking about modern day farming. I think that's really, really cool. So I see a lot of bright things for the future of the sector, and I hope it continues.
Do you think that really? Sorry, I'm just adding another question on. Do you think that change has really come? Do you think like people, you know, they follow stories like you and they're interested, but do you think people actually make that step and make the change in terms of sustainability, or do you think they just? It's almost they're following your story, so they think they're doing something right, but they're not actually making any real change.
No, I think it's a very, very long journey. So when we first started out, for example, there was roughly, I think the figures were around about 1.5 million litres per year of organic milk sold in Scotland for consumption. So that's not stuff we made into other things. That's people buying organic milk to drink. Today, that's still there. Now, we're also selling another 2.5 million litres into food service, which wasn't there 5 years ago. Food service didn't buy, sorry, I say food service, so that's like coffee shops, schools, Back to Story, all these kind of things. They don't buy organic milk. They are now. They didn't buy reusable containers because that was something they did in the 1980s. It was a bit of a pain in the backside that took too much work. They are now. I feel that people are genuinely starting to shift. Yes, the whole population isn't yet, but I think there's certainly green shoots that are happening, and it's very, very bright. And looking at the organic market in Scotland, we took a little bit of a tumble in the cost of living crisis in 2022-23, but organic is growing year on year about 3 to 5%. In the UK, we're growing even bigger than that. And what really, really started, what really, really pleased me when I was over in Denmark just 2 weeks ago, is that I didn't realise that Denmark's one of the world leaders, like Germany, in organic consumption. And when I got off the plane and went to the hotel, the little bottle of milk that was in my room for the coffee and tea was organic. So was the tea and so was the coffee. I went to the conference the next day. The pastries were organic. The coffee there was organic too. Everything was just. I feel like the whole movement is just really beginning to wake up and start moving. And I think that we are here at the right time to do different things, to talk about it. And I think just the general population of the UK, we're always sort of 2 or 3 years behind Europe in food anyway. I just think there's so many opportunities and really interesting things about to happen in the UK with organics and with sustainability and where your food's coming from and the sustainability of that whole cycle.
Perfect.
Sounds brilliant.
Yeah,
Sounds brilliant. Well, good. All I can say is thank you very much for your time, and good luck with your. It's more than good luck because I've got a vested interest.
Of course,
I'm going to be starting drinking organic
my
milk
investment.
now.
I'm hoping my investment is. I'm embarrassed to say I've not actually tried your milk. I don't think.
I'll need a couple of bottles over there.
I'll need to get myself organised. So, no, thank you. We have been trying to get you on for quite a while, and for various reasons, it's taken us quite a while. So, I had a feeling it'd be fascinating. So. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
No, thank you very much for having us on. Yeah, thank you.